the opportunity for you to ask questions in the chat or directly. We'll do our very best to answer them. We did hold a similar session with your secondary colleagues on Tuesday, I believe. But obviously at the moment, if your questions are linked to the plans for the return from the 8th of March at this moment in time, we are very light on details. So we'll need to take your questions away with me and feed them up. But let me just explain a little bit about how that might work and where we've got to. So obviously you'll all be aware of the announcement that the government are hoping to start to reopen schools to more pupils from the 8th of March was the announcement that was made a couple of weeks ago. I did have a meeting yesterday with Sue Baldwin, along with Directors of Children's Services and Directors of Education across the region to start the conversation around what that could look like. As well as sending through to Sue in advance of that meeting on behalf of the region a list of all of the issues and elements that needed to be considered ahead of the wider stroke full opening, as I'm referring to it, because we just don't know what it's going to look like at this moment in time. What I will say in advance, although I'm not Mike, we haven't got him this morning, the infection rates in Essex have fallen significantly, which is very, very good news. Across the county now, they are, I think, around 200 per 100,000, which is lower than most other authorities in the region, bar Suffolk, I think, and Cambridge. So we have reduced absolutely significantly across Essex, and Mike's very confident that the infection rates will continue to drop, and then hopefully, as we consider the wider stroke full opening from the 8th of March, the infection levels will be low enough to consider bringing more children and pupils back into the education system. But it is going to be complicated, and it does need to be very well managed. So I think, you know, the words graduated and considered are coming into the language around what that could look like. So we took that into the conversation with Sue Baldwin yesterday. What Sue did is she took us through a number of slides that the DfE have put together, very much wanted to indicate that the plans for the full stroke wider opening will be led by the science, and they are looking at this moment in time about what the science will say about whether it's a national approach or whether it's a more regional approach, given where we were at before the lockdown with regard to the tiers and so on and so forth. So at the moment, obviously, that is still being worked through. But as you know, we're hoping to get announcements likely on the 22nd of February. But again, that's at that week the announcements will be made, but I don't know whether they will be absolutely on the 22nd of February, and that wasn't made clear in the discussion. Sue then opened up the meeting really about seeking views from the local authorities about what needed to be considered, and you know, what the key challenges and barriers will be. And obviously I think parental confidence is going to be a biggie, as well as the protective measures, and testing as well will be a key issue. Just I'll just pause there if that's okay, because Lisa's just texted me. So I'm going to call Lisa, if that's okay, and put her on loudspeaker. So just bear with me a second. Okay, right. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Claire.
Okay, right. Okay, right. We've got Lisa on the phone. So Lisa, I was just giving an introduction to this week. So I'll just carry on if that's okay.
Yes.
So. Thanks, Lisa. So it was sorry, it's difficult having two conversations at the same time. So it was very much to hear from us. I think it's fair to say that A lot of frustration was aired at the meeting in a very professional way, of course, but really making sure that what happened for January wasn't repeated. And I think the issues around January were why there was an absolute issue around confidence in the department's ability to take this forward. And it depended on where you were in the region. As you know, the situation in Essex was that the whole of Essex, bar Colchester, Tendring and Uttlesford were in the contingency framework and therefore would not be opening on the 4th of January. And ahead of that, those schools in those 3 districts, the primary schools, will know that we sought to extend the contingency framework across the whole of Essex. And that went into the system on the 4th of January and obviously never completed for obvious reasons. However, if you were open on the 4th of January, then everybody will know that the unions challenged that with the Section 44 letters. Many staff didn't go into work that day, and then of course the schools were only open for 1 day anyway. And I won't rehearse everything, you know all of it, but I think what we did was just to echo the fact that this has got to be absolutely a clear plan, predicated on the science, predicated on what we know works, and predicated on it being as robust and sustainable as possible. Of course, we can't predict the virus, but nobody wants to move into a situation where we're potentially closing schools again. So that was heard, that was very, very much heard and very much taken back. I think though the meeting was very much, we're listening. There was obviously no news about what the plans were because they haven't been developed yet, but it was very much we're listening. So I took that as a positive. Of course, like you, whether it will make a difference or not remains to be seen. So that's where we're at with all of the plans moving forward. So the situation is at the moment, we have on average attendance levels are at 11%. Across Essex at this moment in time. Primary attendance is averaging between 16 and 17%. So the majority of pupils in the system are primary, and it is increasing slowly week on week. That said, overall attendance in Essex is lower than the national attendance. I know for some of you it will be higher individually, but the average is lower than the national levels of attendance. The DfE are really focusing their attention at the moment on vulnerable pupils and really pressing for vulnerable pupils to be attending as regularly as possible. So I would just ask you just to consider your level of attendance of your vulnerable pupils, particularly those with social workers, and just try again to encourage attendance as much as you possibly can. And I know you're doing an exceptional job here, carry on with the welfare checks, particularly on your more vulnerable. And it doesn't just have to be the DfE defined vulnerable, you know your vulnerable pupils over and above that definition. But there is more scrutiny coming through now around the levels of attendance around vulnerable pupils. So I'll just leave you with that expectation from the DfE, although I'm managing it generally on your behalf in meetings with them.
Claire,
yeah.
Claire, it might just be worth being aware that if you are a school that has got super high attendance with your vulnerables, you're already pushing massively, and that's a very uncomfortable place to be in when you've done your absolute best to open, and we're at about 40%, 45% attendance here at the moment, and then to go again in light of all the union guidance, in the light of the government guidance, it's just being aware of that very difficult scenario that although Essex is maybe lower on attendance than national, as you've rightly pointed out, there are pockets within Essex where we're significantly above where we should be. And I think it would be useful that if we've got an issue coming up with parents who are challenging us around the vulnerability, and these are children, I'm not talking about the EHC, potentially one planning or social care children, these are the children that are outside of that are the additional extras. But if we are saying, actually, we have to stop at this point, it would be useful to know that we'd have the SEP's backing on supporting us with those conversations.
Absolutely, Nick. So I just want to be very clear, that's what the DfE is saying. I'm not saying that's what Essex is saying. I've lost Lisa. I mean, ultimately, your risk assessment drives your decision, Nick, and that remains the approach in Essex, definitely. But if you're an academy, you know, you may get asked questions about the decisions that you're making. I know the challenges that you're facing. I was just giving you the heads up that that's the situation. Your risk decision, Nick, and we will stand behind you 100% on that. And I'm not I'm managing the conversations with the department at this moment in time. I mean, it as you know, this lockdown feels a lot different to the first lockdown, and I think the DfE expectations are different as well with regard to that, and we all know that. But use your risk assessment, Nick, is all I will say in response to that, to drive your decisions. And if you know that's what you need to do. And obviously you've got to also run your remote education offer. You've got to staffing levels and what's happening, and take the whole pupil cohort into account. So this isn't you've got to run the whole school basically. So just use your as usual, just use your risk assessment to drive your decision making, if that helps, Nick.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
Okay, great. Right, I'm going to stop rambling now, and I'm just going to see if I can get Lisa back as well, and come on to.
I'm here, Claire. I'm here.
Well done. Well done. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you. Good. You can save me now, Lisa. Thank you. Right, I'm going to come on to the questions, if I may, and then please do come in if you want to, everyone. So Lisa, can you help me out with the chat function, if that's okay, if I miss any? So Carl, I'm coming to you. Running low on first aid workplace certificate holders. Is there scope for national certification in place to be lengthened from 3-year certificates to 4-year certificates? I think we'd have to take that one away, Carl, but I don't know if Joe wants to say anything on that that particular issue. Joe, do you want to come in there?
Sorry, I'm cutting up. Can you say that? I didn't hear the question. I can't see it in the chat. So
okay, so it's Carl's question, Joe. He's running low on members of staff holding first aid certificates or they're expiring. Is there scope for the national certification to be extended so it remains in place for 4 years rather than 3 years?
Yeah, so they did relax the rules, and Alex was going to raise that in her next discussion with the DfE, because this did come up last week. So I don't know whether she's had, Alex, you're on the call, aren't you?
Yes, we haven't had a response on that though, but I will chase again this morning.
Thanks, Alex.
And
We'll take that.
And obviously, as people are aware, one of the problems, even if the certificate expiry is extended again, one of the problems is that a lot of the training is face-to-face training, and so not as simple as just signing staff up for online training. So I think that's becoming critical. I think the extension date was the end of this term, so that, I think, matter of urgency now, really.
Okay, we'll take that back. Thank you, Carl. Does that answer your question for the moment? Great, thank you. Okay, I've got Kelly asking a question about clinically extremely vulnerable and those that have been vaccinated. As I said, Nikki is joining us at 10, but she did send something in advance. Just bear with me a second whilst I get hold of it.
No, it's the 21st of February that we're expecting a review on this, regards to the CV, staff, etc. And even when they've had even if they've had the vaccine, they should still be shielding at this moment in time, and we're waiting for an update on the 21st. So there hasn't been a decision yet.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And just reading that through. So the 21st decision is about the shielding. So it's the shielding arrangements that remain in place for clinically extremely vulnerable staff, irrespective of whether they've had the vaccination or not. And then we'll know a bit more on the 20th. So that will come in line with the announcements for the easing of the restrictions as well. Okay.
Dawn, do you want to jump in, because you also had a question about shielding?
It's only that the timelines are dreadful. I've got a member of staff who's been off on long-term sick leave and it runs out February half term. Is it going to be extended up to March the 8th? Because I don't know what to do about this teacher coming back or not. So I need to know soon, really. 20 seconds too late.
We don't have an update, do we, at this moment in time?
No.
Difficult thing.
And also the vaccination makes no difference. If they're shielding the vaccination, they don't come back. So I've got this overlap day. She's due back on the 22nd, and I expect a lot of people have got it as well. Yeah, I don't know whether she can come back.
We'll pick this up with Nikki, shall we, when she joins us?
That'd be useful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Right, okay, I'm just going back to so that was Kelly, thank you. Matt is talking about interesting blog this week with the reduction in the R rate, the return to school language is more about welcoming more pupils back and less about a full return. I mean, we'll have to wait and see, Matt. I mean, I think, you know, given where we were at and given what we know about what went on in the autumn term, I think we should assume, I may be wrong, but I think we should assume that primary will be encouraged back more quickly than secondary. I don't know what that's going to look like.
Wasn't a question really clear. I just thought it was an interesting thing sneaked in the blog.
It is, yeah. But I would work on the assumption of primary moving more quickly than secondary. So I would just work on that assumption.
Claire, Nikki has joined us now. If we want to go back to that question, it's Nikki, are you with us? Sorry to jump on you the minute you come on the call.
I am, yeah.
So we were asking about clinically extremely vulnerable. Obviously, the general question, which we don't think has been answered around vaccination and so on, but more critically, staff who are at the moment signed off, and that hasn't been extended through to March the 8th. Dawn, do you just want to jump in? I'm not sure if I've explained that properly.
You're on mute, Dawn.
Sorry. Nikki, thanks for everything you've been sending out. It's been really useful and answered loads of questions. The question I don't think you're probably going to know the answer to yet, but February half term is when they're all signed off to. That was the original date. Are they going to extend it to March the 8th? If they could just extend it, it would help enormously, or say it's no longer existing. I need to, any guidance on that?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had any further information yet. The current shielding goes until the 21st of February, which is Sunday before half term. And the current guidance says that they should continue to shield until further notice. So I haven't got anything to add to that. Would you
recommend then that we keep them off till the 8th of March? Would that be the right thing to do? Do you want to take some thought on that and get back to us?
Yeah, I mean, I can see what I can find out, but there's nothing being said about it at the moment, but they're going to have to make a decision.
Yeah.
So I think it might be safe to assume that they're off until the 8th of March, but I can't say that's an absolute at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nikki. Okay, thank you. Just going to go back to the questions then. Thank you, Dawn. So question from Liz about what is the figure for attendance, and then Lisa's put 22%. It's not that high. Sorry, Linda. It's not that high, Linda. It's averaging about 15% is the national attendance data at this moment in time. That's and we're following the trend. It is increasing week on week, but it was 15%. We're lagging a little bit, the national data, but it's flagging around 15%. And then Marie, yes, use your risk assessment. As I continue to say, use your risk assessment with regard to the decisions that you make about current attendance levels in your school. And then I think the next few are just sort of what will happen really. So let me talk a little bit about, well, I don't know anything to be honest with you, but let's just talk a little bit about what may or may not happen with everything. And your secondary colleagues are in a similar position really. The rumours about catch up and the holidays and extension of the school day. I think they are rumours at this moment in time. Obviously, you know that Sir Kevin Collins, the former Chief Executive of the Education Endowment Foundation, has been appointed as the Education Recovery Commissioner. I'll send it round in the morning, but I did see his sort of role profile, I wouldn't call it that, was published this morning. I'll put it in the comms tomorrow. He's got, at the moment, he's been appointed for 9 months with a potential extension of a further 9 months. And his remit is solely really around education recovery. It's quite interesting what the role profile says about what he's not overseeing, which is the return, remote education and other bits and pieces from memory. I think the issue of catch-up is going to be an interesting one, and it will be Sir Kevin Collins to advise. His role is advisory. I think the document made that very clear, and it is around, you know, the use of the catch-up funding, the extra 300 million that was announced, on top of that that's already been distributed either directly to schools or through the National Tutoring Programme, and other strategies for catch-up. And the ones that obviously have hit the media have been the extension of the school day and the summer holidays. I think from my perspective, and I think hopefully Kevin Collins, I mean, it's a good appointment, and a lot of people know Kevin very well. So there's a lot of ways to get into Kevin that I think we can all utilise going forward. And I think he will be very, very, very understanding of the sector and of the fatigue and the stresses and the strain on the sector going forward. So I think you should have confidence in his appointment. We certainly do. And I think, you know, he will have to balance the need for the recovery and the catch-up along with the demands placed on him by the government and what they're seeking to achieve. I'd also, you know, also be very mindful, and I appreciate, I think Sir Kevin is dealing with this. When we talk about catch-up, I think it's important that we don't just talk about academic catch-up, as important as that is. Children have missed out on a whole host of experiences this past year. In fact, with the quality of the remote learning offers that are being delivered, academic attainment and progress is something that the schools have got, you know, got eyes and ears on, albeit there are gaps in children's knowledge moving forward. But it's the wider extracurricular, social interaction, music, sport, mental health and emotional well-being, all of that needs to be factored in as well. So I think that there are ways to look at not just what happens in school, but what happens outside of school as part of the catch-up programme. And I'd very much hope that that is coming through from what Sir Kevin Collins does advise the government on. So I would try to reassure your staff at this moment in time that A, we don't know, B, any increase in work outside of contract is voluntary. So if you did want to run a summer school, it would be voluntary. And obviously the National Tutoring Programme and the catch-up funding that you've got is sort of happening outside of the school day anyway, and was happening before the lockdown. So I think we need to wait. His announcements will be through, probably linked to the return announcements as well, but I would just try to reassure your staff as much as possible that any additional expectations on them will need to be managed. Obviously the fatigue in the system, and at this moment in time, you know, you can't enforce staff to work beyond their contract. That's correct, isn't it, Nikki? Unless it's done voluntary, and she's nodding, thank you. So I would really try to reassure your staff that we don't know what they are. I'm sure Sir Kevin Collins will take the workforce into account in his advice, and I would you know, advocate that you do promote that this is a positive announcement. He's been a former head, former DCS, and obviously has all the knowledge at his fingertips about Education Endowment Foundation and what works there and the interventions that work, and hopefully some sensible proposals will come through as a result. So, okay, so thank you. So what if Boris Johnson says all primary children back on the 8th of March? He may well do. So when I say careful and considered, I'm sort of talking about primary and secondary in the round, really. And I think what we all experienced, I know some of you experienced it individually, but collectively, the primary schools, the evidence is very clear that whilst there were infections of children, primary age children through the autumn term, that there wasn't clear evidence that children were contracting coronavirus through the primary environment. That said, within the Kent variant, the strain, that strain of the virus, we do know in Essex that it was the 10 to 19 age range that started to increase the rates of infection in the county when they started to go up considerably at the beginning of December, and it was secondary age pupils who started that in terms of the rates of infection that age range had. So it's not the same as primary. So I don't know, he may well say all primary children back, but that will be depending on the science, and that will be depending on the coronavirus infection rates within the community. But as I say, the evidence is that primary schools do not contribute to the increase in infection rates in the community. That is different for your secondary colleagues, I think. So I think that the careful and considered will be more about primary first, secondary second, bar probably the examination year groups to begin with. Probably that model will remain in place for the remainder of this term potentially, and then look to see what might happen in the summer term. The other thing I should have said is that Mike Gogarty also, if he was here, would say that there will be a natural reduction in the virus in the community during the summer anyway, simply because of the weather. So, you know, we should be able to predict a fairly stable summer term as much as possible. And then that will also depend on how other restrictions will or will not be eased. So I don't think we will be seeing, as you've been picking up in the media, a huge easing of other restrictions to enable education to open for more children through the remainder of this academic year. A lot of noise in the news at the moment about summer holidays. Certainly Mike said to your secondary colleagues on Tuesday, you know, he doesn't expect there to be any foreign travel, things like that happening. So it will feel very different this time round, to really keep a lid on the community infection rates as much as possible, and to try to keep a lid on any of the new variants, along with the vaccination programme and what that will look like. So there is a different feel and a different set of dynamics to this easing of these restrictions than we had during May, June through the summer months into September. So that's sort of in the round, that's what I mean. I think we should assume, well, I think we can assume primary will be back at higher levels of attendance than secondary. And if the science supports a full opening of primary, then that potentially will be announced along with the rationale and the science behind it.
Claire, would you sort of vaguely link to that, I suppose, but could you give an update on vaccination for education workforce and where we are? And also, you'll be aware we've had discussions about the odd occasion where GP surgeries or PCNs have approached individuals around vaccination, and what the local authority, the education team stance is on that.
I will do. Thank you, Pam. I'll try and answer those really. So at this moment in time, the official position is that there isn't, other than health and social care staff, there are no announcements on prioritising any other sectors for vaccination, including education staff. And it's a very difficult question. And Mike did give a view on this himself to your secondary colleagues on Tuesday, and his view differs from my view, but he's looking at it from a public health perspective, and therefore need to respect his view. He is saying it is very, very, very difficult from a public health perspective. The prioritisation are those who are at significant risk of harm if they contract the coronavirus. And that is what's happening now with the prioritisation, and that's what the JVCI have listed. Beyond that, it is very difficult to identify a sector of the workforce over and above other parts of the workforce, really. His view is that where you can't work from home and you are expected to attend your workplace, as is happening with education, there should be at least twice weekly testing of everybody required to attend the workplace. So he's actually very supportive of what's happening in education, would like to see that rolled out across all sectors that still remain operational at this moment in time. But he's not taking a view on the prioritisation of education staff. I continue to lobby on your behalf and did yesterday with Sue Baldwin that I think one of the key issues is if you keep saying that education is a national priority, then a key way to promote confidence to parents and staff about the full return when that happens is to announce a vaccination programme with the workforce to enable that to happen, because it will prevent the risk of staff being significantly ill after contracting coronavirus. So we have continued to push that back. What it won't do is stop transmission rates, as you know. That evidence is not yet known, but with the infection rates being of a very, very low level to enable the wider opening, full opening, then actually there should be low levels of community infection rates anyway. It's down to the JVCI. We did lobby and push again on your behalf, and I will continue to do that. We did extend the definition of health and social care staff to enable special school staff to come into the list of vaccinations. I appreciate that many mainstream staff also provide care needs to pupils with SEND, but it just gets very, very challenging then to try to extend the definition further. We have looked at that. I have looked at that on your behalf, but it is getting us into challenging situation in terms of the sufficiency of the vaccines. We still need to continue with the prioritisation as well. So at this moment in time, the strategy is to lobby, and I absolutely want to see a position statement. I did say to Sue Baldwin yesterday that a position statement on vaccination of the education workforce needs to be made, at the same time as the plans for the wider or full opening, because I think it just needs to be answered in terms of trying to support the position. With regard to GPs contacting schools because they've got spare vaccines and also they don't want to go to waste, I mean, that's a discretionary move. It's not something the local authority has any control over whatsoever. I think it does place staff in a very difficult position and predicament then in terms of what do you do, how do you respond to that, depending on what happens. And Alex and I have been pondering this, and I've been pondering it with the vaccination team as well, in terms of, do we advise you on it, really? Because the minute we advise you on it, it sort of gives a framework as well. I mean, technically it shouldn't be happening, which is why it's a difficult position to advise. So maybe not for repeating, really, but if I was to advise, I would sort of, reflecting on this during the week, probably advise that you follow the prioritisation list. So you might just want to bring your elder teachers forward a little bit more. They will come into the prioritisation. So you are still sticking with the prioritisation list at this moment in time, and not bringing those currently outside of the prioritisation list into the opportunity to be vaccinated, because the challenge that you've got is you then get those that have been vaccinated as opposed to those that haven't been vaccinated. So it's a real difficult one. I mean, technically the message to your staff and the message from me to you, to your staff, is the education workforce at this moment in time is not considered a priority for vaccination. The vaccination process is as per the prioritisation list that the JCVI have published.
I mean, Claire, I do think it's worth, and just be aware we are recording, but but I think it's worth just saying, though, that is not always the message coming from NHS, that they are certainly have fed back to some schools, head teachers, teachers, that yes, they are absolutely prioritising teachers. So, I mean, so far, my advice, I suppose, has almost been, if individuals are offered vaccinations, as long as they can make sure that they will get a second vaccination, that's one thing. But it feels a little bit like head teachers playing God if they're deciding which of their staff should or shouldn't be vaccinated. So I wonder whether, at the moment at least, heads should almost be shying away from making that decision on behalf of others. But certainly the message from some GP surgeries is, oh yes, teachers are being prioritised and so on. So I think there are mixed messages, as there so often are.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and as I said, you know, it's very discretionary what they're doing. I mean, I think, you know, they're doing it because there's a lot of pressure for education staff to be prioritised for vaccination. But technically they're doing it at their discretion, really, and I do think it does place heads in a very difficult position, which is why I was a bit careful with what I said. Basically, I can't say don't accept or do accept, and I can't say what to do if you get the call. Really, it's a very knotty, thorny issue, which is why I suppose the best advice I can give is you might just want to accelerate the prioritisation list across your workforce, because at least you know that they're in the prioritisation list, and at least there's a clear rationale for that. They're just accessing the vaccine sooner rather than the current timescale would enable. So I kind of think that's maybe a fairish way to look at the situation, Pam, but I absolutely agree with you. Totally agree with you. Okay.
Carl has suggested performance-related vaccination, which is an excellent plan. So you work on that, Carl.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what do we do, Neera? What do we do if we know a family positive is not isolating? That's a good question, and I might need to take that one away. Alex, do we know the answer to that? My immediate suggestion is to contact the Essex contact tracing team, but beyond that, have you got any thoughts on that, Alex?
No, I would have said exactly the same.
You send them to prison for 10 years, Claire. That's what you do, 10 years in prison.
So, Alan, contact the tracing team, because they will be responsible for making contact with this family, so they can take that intelligence and contact the family on your behalf. It's up to them to decide what happens next, Alan. Okay, so Matt, thank you. Okay, that's fine. So the figures I've got for the national percentage of attendance is overall. So thank you, Matt, for clarifying. That's 22% for primary. Carol,
well, just jumping back to nurseries and so on. I know that and in the chat, where are we here? Teresa's asking about special school staff and nursery staff, and I know that in Southend and Thurrock, they've included early years staff within their vaccination programme. So is that, and obviously we have far more settings within Essex, but I'm assuming at the moment that they're not being prioritised for vaccine, that group.
Not in Essex, no, not at the moment. And I think I did speak to my colleague in Southend, and I think we just need to be very careful when we say prioritise. So there is what happens is you sort of put a list through the local vaccination system, and then it sort of goes in, and then people get contacted to come to their appointment. I think they're just at the moment considering putting early years into that list. I don't think it's been confirmed that it is in that list. The challenge for us is obviously the minute we go beyond the special school sector, we open up the need for vaccines to, you know, thousands of staff, really, which would destabilise the current prioritisation list. We were able to add special school staff because we had sufficient quantity of vaccinations within the amount allocated for health and social care staff. So we just included them in the allocation that was made in Essex for the workforce there. It makes it much more challenging for us to do anything else. And then I think, unfortunately, the minute you start to include any mainstream sector, you're all going to ask me to include more. If I was going to include another tranche into the vaccination programme, I think my priority would be to then extend those staff who provide close care and support to pupils with SEND. Because at least there would be consistency with your special school colleagues. But again, we're looking at that, but we haven't made a decision on whether that's viable or not at this moment in time. Okay.
Claire, one question, again, I think might need to be a takeaway, but I've been asked and have asked a few times around the catch-up funding, and the period of expenditure was extended, but do you know, are you aware whether schools can carry forward the catch-up funding beyond the financial year and so on? I'm not sure if Ian's here, but I think, yeah. Ian, do you want to jump in? Maybe wrong Ian, or right Ian, of course, but...
it was just that at the moment we've been told that we've got funding till the end of this academic year, which was based on the fact that, you know, children would all be in school, you know, from September. Things have changed considerably. So my view is it'd be very harsh if that time limit isn't extended, because the longer that we've got more children out of school, you know, we need, I don't want to be spending the money in a short period of time when potentially I want to use some of it in September. I'm sure other heads will want to do the same as well.
Okay, we'll take that away. Alex, can we take that one away? Ian, we'll confirm that. We'll take that one away. Okay, thanks, Ian. I'm just hoping I don't miss anything, but I can come back at the moment.
Liz has asked a couple of times about the approach to having to register negative results. Liz, do you want to jump in and ask?
Yeah, it was only that someone had asked earlier on in the chat about if there'd been any decision on the rationale behind it. That was all.
So we have flagged this with the DFEs. We've had a lot of queries on whether or not schools need to, or staff need to continue to report void or negative test results. And the response is always, yes, please, they need to report all results. They're keeping a really close eye on the efficacy of the tests and how well the programme is going. So they really do need all test results on there. Obviously, we would prioritise if you get a positive result, recording that absolutely straight away and letting the school know. But maybe if you get a negative or a void, you can come into school and register it at your leisure. But it does definitely need to be registered, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. Sorry, I was distracted by the chat. Sorry. Some of the chat is just happening by itself, so I'm going to leave that to conversations happening in the chat. There's a question from Michael about a Year 6 residential trip in June. Potential cost for cancellation. We've been asked about this as well from Essex Outdoors, to be honest with you. I think I can't answer the question because it would depend, I think, on the easing of the restrictions at this moment in time and what they will look like. They may well be eased in terms of education, but they might not be eased for other areas, including activity places that you would normally send your children to. So we'll log that one, I think, in terms of needing an answer as soon as we know more about what the easing of the national restrictions are going to look like going forward. I think that is linked into that. Another one about residential trips, should you be cancelling? I mean, it's a difficult one to answer, as I say. You know, you might want to cancel just for the sake of them being able to know what's going on, so you'll have certainty there. Otherwise, at the moment, it would absolutely depend on the easing of the restrictions, I think. Okay. Are staff to test over half term? Our advice, we need to perhaps put this in the FAQs, Alex, is yes. I would suggest we say yes, because I think this is a habit that staff need to get into. This is about them remaining negative. Obviously, they can contract coronavirus anywhere. So even if they're not in school, it's just the assurance that they remain negative all the time. So yes, I think we would ask.
Claire, the only flip side of that, and I think it is a genuine issue, is, and I agree with you in terms of the actual public health message, that it would be helpful for staff to continue to test. But the problem then is recording those results, and whether staff would then feel the need or should be advised to contact the school to record those results during the week. And obviously that will put some workload on whoever's accepting those results. I mean, if a school has an entirely remote system set up, that's fine, but that would be the only downside, I think, of that.
I mean, Alex and I can address this, but I would be very pragmatic, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't know, I might be talking out of turn here, but my view would be that, you know, ultimately, if there are 2 negative tests, then that's fine. They would just need to notify the school if there was a positive test and then start the recording again following half term would be a you know, pragmatic way forward, Pam.
I think the only problem in reality is that staff seem to have a compulsion to let the school know that they are negative. It's sort of, it's very weird. But I mean, I agree with you to a great extent, but I think if head teachers decide to ask staff or suggest that they carry on that testing, to make it very clear that they don't need 30 phone calls on a Monday morning, for example. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we've done vaccines. There's some comments in the chat about catch up. I mean, I think we just need to wait for what Kevin Collins will announce in terms of plans with regard to that. Vacancies and appointments and happening face to face. Yeah, down to each individual risk assessment, absolutely. I would determine that. We did answer this, I think, within the FAQs last time, really. So we'll just make sure. I mean, obviously, you need to restrict visitors to the school environment. You know, that is part of your risk assessment. But use your risk assessment to determine your decision around the visitors to your school, basically, and those your recruiting would be part of that approach. So, okay. Is there any further guidance on the attendance code for any child who goes on holiday? Well, technically holidays are illegal at this moment in time, so it shouldn't be happening. And again, we'll need to see what the easing of the restrictions are. So, you know, term time holiday has remained as is, really. It's up for head teachers to authorise or not. I would presume you wouldn't, even if you are allowed to go on holiday. Term time holidays really shouldn't be authorised. And then we can consider whether you want to proceed with a penalty notice as we have done all the way through. We are looking at seeking further advice from the department on expectations around attendance when the wider straight full return is announced. You know, as you know, we were really trying to work very collegiately and collaboratively with parents during the start of the autumn term. I think from September, I think things might be slightly different in terms of expectations that all pupils should be attending in line with the attendance arrangements as they will be then. So, but we'll update you more on that when we know more. So, a question from Nick about the remote education offer evaluation spreadsheet. Lisa, do you want to come in there? I mean, obviously it's mandatory to publicise your remote learning offer, and as you know, that's now enshrined in the coronavirus law. That from the 25th of February, Alex? I can't quite remember the date.
12th.
12th, thank you. 12th of February, you must evaluation. I think that's an Essex support, that is, isn't it? Lisa, do you want to come in here? Lisa?
Sorry, Claire, I was trying to unmute. Yeah, there's not much else really to say, Claire, other than what you've just said at this moment in time.
So the spreadsheet is an associated training, webcasts that the team have put on, it is really a support offer. It's not mandatory. It was something that's available to schools if they want to use it. The spreadsheets to help them evaluate their remote education offer, something we were asked for by some schools as some additional support. They're there and they're available for you to use, and they're built on the guidance from the DfE, but certainly not mandatory for you to use if it's something that you've already got in hand and don't need something additional.
Claire, in terms of remote learning, obviously we are, and we had a discussion about this a couple of days ago, but I think would you be able to just update head teachers about the approach, both of Ofsted and the local authority, in terms of remote learning complaints to them? Thank you.
Yes, of course.
I can do that, Claire, if you want me to.
Please do, Lisa. I was going to ask you to come in anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. So in terms of Ofsted complaints, and obviously Joe's on the call as well, we're not treating those any differently to how we would normally. So your SEP in the main would be in touch with you to let you know that there's been a complaint and what the nature of that is, and then that would be explored with you and the response would be made. And the SEP should make it clear what that response is going to say as well, so that you know whether or not there's any further advice that needs to be taken. We have seen an increase in members' inquiries about remote education specifically since January. And some parents, unfortunately, and I saw a bit of this in the chat earlier, are comparing, you know, school A to school B down the road in terms of in the main parental complaints to members, where they just feel that the offer for their child is not good enough, and much of that relates to where there are children that are that do have SEND needs in the main. So what we're doing there, as far as possible, is to apply the same approach. So the SEP would be in contact with you. They'd let you know there'd been a members' inquiry. The response that we make to that counsellor is very, very similar to that which you would see written in any Ofsted complaint. We haven't done this all of the time, but where possible, if the constituent has also contacted us through Have Your Say, we're sending exactly the same response. And then what we're then asking parents to do, if they've come to us through Have Your Say as well, is to contact the schools directly in the first instance if they've got any further concerns. So hopefully that is beginning to happen. But as I say, we're trying as quickly as possible to be in touch with yourselves as head teachers to be able to get those signed off and sent back as soon as we can. We have had some schools where they've had complaints about not just remote learning offer, but also numbers of children that are in school. And some schools have suffered with that more than others, but again, we're still applying the same approach. So obviously you would have contact from your SEP, and then that would be followed through and that would be returned. And where there are local councils that are having inquiries sent to them directly, we're asking that in the main that they are forwarded to us, and that does happen, but they tend to be quite slow at the moment at coming through. So if you do, what I would say is if you do get a complaint that comes directly from a local council to you, you can direct it straight back to us, and then we will pick that up through Have Your Say and through members' inquiries to be able to answer that on your behalf in the same way as we would do normally.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lisa. So I think I've just had a quick look through the chat, and Alex is just basically just making sure we're absolutely clear about the advice around testing during half term. So we'll put something in the communications tomorrow. I mean, you know, I think it's just good practice to test regularly, I think, really. So I think we'll put something in the comms tomorrow, and then obviously make sure you've got sufficient numbers of tests to enable that to happen. I think many heads that.
Yeah, so can I just pick up on that a little bit now as well, because we know the advice that we're giving around half term is different to the DfE advice. It's absolutely right that the DfE have said you don't need to test during half term because we're only asking you to test because you're going into school and you're not going into school during half term. But we felt that as Claire said, it's good practice to regularly test. And also, if you're going to test positive, we thought people would probably rather know on the Wednesday, Thursday during half term than on the Monday morning. And we did canvass some opinion on that before we put it in the guidance. So we are aware that is different. And the other thing I wanted to add was the DfE have now released the information about how you reorder and restock your test kits. So you just use the contact us form. I can put the link to it in the chat if helpful, and I'll put it in the comms as well. But you just put every couple of weeks a contact us form via the DfE website.
Thank you, Alex. A question from Jonah Davis on safeguarding. Joe, can I bring you in? I mean, I think she's basically resolved it, but anybody else had it? It's about family didn't respond to the calls, and then forwarding that to police didn't respond, social care didn't respond to begin with, and then forcing to do that really. So Joe, can you just talk through again the issue where through the welfare checks no response from the family is being made at all?
Yeah, sure, Claire. And this is a tricky one, and I'm picking up lots of calls from head teachers around this. So it's around the level of risk, really. The police will not do a welfare check because they have their own triaging system. So they won't go to a home just because the parents are not engaging with the school, and you know, that's it's not a priority for them. Social care will have the same view. So it is around the level of risk. I think probably the easiest and quickest thing to say on that is that if you've got families where you're in that situation, give me a call and we'll talk about the individual circumstances of the case and make a decision about how best to address that individual case, because they all need to be based on their own merits, really. So I'm happy to take those calls, but I mean, where other services are already involved with the family. So if, for example, it's a child with a social worker, then of course you'd be in discussion with the social worker and any other agencies involved. Think about are there other siblings in the family? Is there an older child at secondary school? Are they engaging? Is there another professional having contact, perhaps through a medical route? So you can think about all those things. But as I say, I'm happy to talk through those individual cases with you if you've got concerns.
Great, thank you, Joe. I think Catherine's made a comment there about a false positive test in a school and then the PCR testing negative. Yes, that is the situation, which is why you need a confirmatory PCR after a lateral flow test. But yes, if it is negative, then obviously self-isolation then doesn't need to proceed. I think the intention of lateral flow tests is to really just really find those that are asymptomatic and get them to self-isolate. So the value of them is very much around testing asymptomatic, regular testing of anybody and not showing symptoms in order to find those who are carrying the coronavirus. There are risks of false positives, unfortunately, but I think the public health view is that they absolutely outweigh the identification of infected, those who are positive but asymptomatic. Mark's just asking Joe, has the welfare check process, yes, been updated to reflect what you've just said, which it has, and we sent that out, didn't we, a few weeks ago?
Yeah.
The flow chart probably doesn't say contact Joe at any point, does it? Can we just check that and then we'll reissue the flow chart, Alex?
It doesn't say that. For a very good reason. Thank you, Claire.
That's all right.
No, I'm serious. If you've got concerns, then do phone. And of course, you can go through to the hub. So the hub is really the first point of contact. But I am happy to talk through individual cases.
Right. Okay. So I can't see any more questions coming in.
Yeah, there is one. Could you Claire, could you just clarify, or Alex, clarify test and trace expectations during half term?
Yes, of course, and this will be in the comms tomorrow as well. Pam, Alex, do you want to come in here?
Thank you. So all we've had from the DfE on this is the expectation that schools support the activity of contact tracing over half term. So our advice will be the same as it has over previous holiday periods. We would hope that the need for contact tracing will reduce as time goes on, obviously where positive cases haven't been in school for 2 days or more, they then don't need to contact you because there's no need to contact trace school contacts. But our suggestion is the same as it was at Christmas. Think about offering an email address to parents to use to let you know that you can monitor for kind of an hour a day and really minimal activity needed. And we will put that in the comms so you've got that, but it'll be the same as advice as we gave for the Christmas holiday.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. I'm just reading Miriam's question about reception people going to nursery. It's a difficult one, Miriam, with regard to that, because obviously, whilst all the expectations are on schools to continue to provide either in-school learning if the children are eligible to attend, or remote education, as we know, there's no expectations for parents to engage in the remote learning offer. And obviously this parent has decided to send their child to the nursery. Miriam, can we take that one offline and come back to you in a bit more detail, because it may be that we need to contact the nursery and find out what's going on there. So Alex, can we note that one and talk to Carolyn about that one? Thank you.
Thank you.
And then is Rowan, I mean, the welfare checks, Rowan, should cover your question. So yes, I mean, you know, we're very clear that welfare checks should be for all children, and definitely if children are not engaging in remote education. I appreciate you say every day. I would still advocate, as I hope Joe would support, that you would want to have a conversation with the family about the reasons for that and use the welfare check process to do that, because find out what's going on, because that in itself would trigger some concern, I would suggest, about what's happening in the home. So I would use the welfare check process to help with that one as well going forward. Okay, I think that covers most of the questions. We'll have a look. We will obviously be sending some quite specific comms out to you tomorrow ahead of the half-term break, detailing obviously some of the details that we've just said around testing, test and trace, and so on and so forth. And then obviously then hopefully we will come back to some clear guidance and some clear plans week commencing the 22nd about the expectations from the 8th of March and what they will look like, and no doubt we'll talk during that week, I'm sure, when we know what's going on with regard to that. So Pam, is there anything I haven't covered that I need to cover before we've got 5 minutes, obviously need to close the meeting?
Sure. I don't think so, unless of course anyone wants to just jump in, but just a question, as I had before the Christmas holidays, who will be available during half term? So the school comms team, for example, if hopefully people won't need support or advice during half term, but if that is the case.
Okay, we'll make sure that that's very clear, as we did during the Christmas holidays, really. So we will, if the school comms inbox isn't being monitored, then we will put an out of office message about where you can go for direct contact if you need to be contacted urgently, and we'll put some contact details out there. I mean, I'm going to be around bar Friday, I think, anyway, but we'll put some details out there, Pam, for everybody.
Okay, and I'm around as well, sadly not going anywhere, so if people need support from me, I'm around as well. I
seem to have confused people, and if I have, I apologise. it's always the way. The expectation about engagement in remote learning, statutory for children to participate. Let me take that one away and clarify that one, because I don't want to have a confusion out there really. Trying to remember the name of it. I'll come back to you. We'll clarify that one in the communications, Alex. I've confused people, so apologies if I have. Let me clarify that one in the comms tomorrow, everyone. I think the issue is what happens if parents don't engage. That's the issue, isn't it, really, more than anything. Great. Okay, so thank you very much indeed. A lot of content there, so thank you for all your questions. I hope we've helped this morning between us, and obviously where we're unable to answer, just keep asking the questions anyway, because we're building up a bank of questions and queries regarding the expectations from the 8th of March, which obviously we don't yet know. So it really does just leave me to say, I think, you know, please do absolutely take the time to rest and recuperate. I know that there are, you know, going to be some expectations at the beginning of the week around contact tracing, but hopefully not to the degree at Christmas, because obviously the restrictions that we're all under at this moment in time have reduced the infection levels considerably. So please do absolutely use that time to rest and recuperate. It's going to be a very busy and continued to be challenging half term, albeit short, thankfully, but it will be a very busy half term for everybody. So please do next week.
Claire, just one
Yes.
question for Alex that we've just missed to go in there, which is lateral flow testing kits. When members are leaving, do they need to return them?
Alex, I mean, yes, I think yes, because, you know, they're not assigned to the individual, are they? They can be reassigned.
Yeah, that's a good question. We didn't actually get a response from the DFE.
No.
So if people decide to stop partaking in the testing or leave, they have signed those test kits out. They are kind of logged as being given to that individual, and we haven't had a response on whether they can be given back. So that's something else that we'll put in the comms as well.
I think that would be helpful, Alex. Certainly my guidance or advice has been until we get a confirmation on that, not to reassign them, but obviously.
Yeah, I think the main thing people were thinking about was the public health risk of something having been with someone in there and then giving it to another individual, but that's fine. We'll get some guidance and put that in the comms for you.
Great, thank you. Okay, in which case then I'm going to close the meeting and say have a lovely half-term break, everyone. Please do get some time with your family. I know we can't go anywhere, but even just switching off from the laptop, the emails and the diary is a refreshing and the ability to refresh and recharge. So please do take the time with your family, and no doubt we'll be in touch week commencing the 22nd. So thank you very much for your time this morning.